Good morning. I'm amazed to see so many people in one room. It's a long time since I've seen this many people. Certainly that's not that many people attend the new lectures I normally give. So Wendy and I are here to talk about a development that we have been working on for some time in our team in Southampton, at the University of Southampton, with the Medical Research Council. And the skills that Wendy's going to demonstrate and run the workshop on this afternoon we developed to support our work to improve the diets and nutritional status of young women. And I'm going to tell you why we're so obsessed with supporting young women to live well, to eat better, and to look after themselves better. So today we're facing an epidemic of life-threatening chronic diseases. 100 years ago, people were most likely to die from infectious disease, things like pneumonia or tuberculosis. Today, the number one killers, as we all know, are chronic diseases, lifestyle-related diseases, heart disease, cancer, and the complications caused by diabetes. So this is a map which shows the numbers of people suffering in 2013 from diabetes around the world. And in 2013, you can see there were already 382 million people suffering from diabetes. By 2015, we anticipate that this will be nearly doubled, this number, or we'll be approaching double this number. Between 7 and 10% of the world's population will have diabetes, a rise of 55%. As you can see, the numbers are going up everywhere, but they're particularly going up in the poorest parts of the world. This is due, of course, in part to the rising prevalence of obesity. But what it's also due to is the way that women around the world are able to nourish and grow their fetuses and their babies. And this is where you guys come in, and this is why we think, why we're here today, and why we hope is of interest to you. So during your lifetime, from the time the sperm fertilizes the ovum, the human body goes through 55 complete cell divisions to go from egg and sperm through to fully grown human. The amazing thing is that 45 of those 55 cell divisions happen before we're even born. All our organs, systems, functions are laid down in the 9 months before we arrive in the world. And we know that how you grow in those 9 months determines, or we now know that how you grow in those 9 months determines your lifelong risk of those chronic diseases we were talking about: heart disease, diabetes, stroke, and some cancers. And the most important thing that determines how you grow as a fetus in your mother's uterus is her ability to nourish and nurture you. The person who first made this observational discovery was David Barker, and he worked at the University of Southampton and devoted the last 30 years of his working life to exploring this process and to understanding the connection between what happens to you and how you grow in uterus and the way your mother is able to nourish and nurture you and your lifelong risk of these diseases. And he was my father, by the way, that's the family connection. And he used to use this lovely homely metaphor to explain how he felt this process worked and why it was so important. He used to say that human beings are like motor cars, and they break down being a euphemism for acquiring a chronic disease or becoming very ill. They break down either because they're driven on very rough roads, they have poor life experiences, or because they were badly made in the first place. Rolls-Royces, the point is that Rolls-Royces don't break down, not even on rough roads, no matter where they are driven. And what we are trying to do now is to support women to grow Rolls-Royce babies, babies that don't break down, babies that don't become chronically ill. So if we want to improve, to build better babies, if you like, Rolls-Royce babies, we have to support women to be better nourished and to be able to nourish their fetuses and babies better in the womb and in the first years of life. What we also know is that by the time a woman becomes pregnant, a lot of this is a little bit too late to influence the growth and the development of her fetus. By the time that tiny fertilized egg is implanted in the uterus, between the moment of conception and implantation, that tiny little conceptus has read somehow magically and understood the nutritional environment into which it's going to implant. It's already decided what pattern and speed of growth it's going to adopt and kind of where it's going to end up by the point of birth. So what this implies is that we need to support women to look after themselves, to eat better and to be better nourished before they become pregnant, to enter pregnancy in a better state. And we need to break a cycle that we have acquired of poor nutrition and poor health behaviours. So if we start, this is a cycle obviously, but if we start at the top, the cycle that we're talking about really involves young women having poorer quality diets, and we know that those young women who have poor quality diets are also more likely to be obese and to take less exercise, and to become overweight and obese. We know then that they enter pregnancy poorly prepared and less well able to sustain a healthy pregnancy and healthy growth and development of the fetus. And we know from our work in Southampton, with thousands and thousands of women becoming pregnant and going through pregnancy, that they make relatively minimal changes to their diets throughout pregnancy. So the diet that you enter pregnancy with tends to be the diet that you sustain throughout your pregnancy. Women then who have poorer quality diets before pregnancy, as I said, tend to have poorer quality diets during pregnancy, and they then pass these poor quality diets on to their infants. Again, this is work that we've been doing in Southampton and around the world, and we've found these patterns repeating again and again in different populations in whom we've worked. So these poorer, so infants and small children have poorer quality diets that they're introduced to, and we have discovered that these poor quality diets, by the time of age 4, the children have greater fat mass, less lean mass, so more fat and less muscle, if you like, and they tend to have, by the age of 4, already lower IQ. What we're just working out now is the connection between lower IQ at age 4 and poorer educational attainment in adolescence, but we would expect and we hypothesize that we would see the children with lower IQ at age 4 to have poorer educational attainment. And the children who have poorer educational attainment and come from the more disadvantaged communities in whom we work then tend to have less healthy behaviours and eat more poorly, exercise less, and become obese, and so the cycle continues. So how do we break this cycle? Well, Wendy and I have spent many years talking to women about what stops them or what might stop them eating well. And the 4 pinky red strange looking squares in the middle are what we have identified as 4 key factors which predict or which influence women's ability to eat well and look after themselves well. These are observations made during focus group discussions that we've then confirmed in survey work. So women struggle with a lack of social support for eating well, their partners and their children, and that quote illustrates one of the things that we heard women say. Their partners and their children don't particularly want to eat well, and therefore it makes it very difficult for them to feed themselves well and to feed their families well. They find it difficult in a busy, hectic and pressured and often chaotic lives to give food a high priority. It's easier to focus on other things, or other things are just much more pressing. Your children's safety, your housing needs, etc., are more important to you in the immediate term than how you eat. There is a limit to which people tend to believe that eating well is a good thing anyway. You can apparently be too healthy. And ultimately, and underlying all of these things, there is a sense that we detected, particularly amongst disadvantaged women, of lower sense of self-efficacy. This is less belief that they can control events in their life, less belief that they can achieve the things that they want to do. And in the context of our work, this would be to feed themselves and their families well. So, and I should also say that in all the discussions we had with women, there was, of course, a lot of discussion about the cost of food and the difficulty of feeding people on a budget. But actually, interestingly, when we tested this quantitatively in our survey work, we discovered it not to have independent or its own effects on women's quality of diet that weren't somehow mediated through these other important factors. So if we're going to support women to eat better, we have to do something, we believe, to enhance women's sense of self-efficacy, this sense that they can control events in their own lives. And one thing we know for sure, and I suspect all of you know too, is that giving people information doesn't make them change. The thing we know is that if you tell young women that they have to eat better, no matter for what reasons you explain that they have to eat better and they have to look after themselves better, this is simply not enough, and it's simply not going to support change. Certainly not at the scale and to the quantity that we expect. And this lovely quote is actually from a woman who worked in one of the Sure Start Children's Centres in Southampton, where we did a lot of our early research. And it seems to epitomise to us the challenge that we all face as people who are concerned to look after, nurture and nourish women better. So with this in mind, how do we support young women to eat better? What can we actually do? And this is the point at which I'm going to hand over to my, I want to say glamorous assistant, but that would be entirely unfair. Associate Professor Wendy Lawrence, who is going to tell you more about healthy conversation skills training, which is our approach to tackling this issue. Thank you.
Is this working on you? No, mine's gone. Okay, I don't have a... I'll just use this. Cool. So this is the point which I said I was going to ask a volunteer who has thought of something they'd like to change, because I'm just going to demonstrate to you 2 different ways that you might talk to someone and how they affect the sort of chances of someone making a change. So, has anyone that's near enough to me, you can be at the back if you want, if you can run fast, is there anyone that would like to volunteer to pop up here and speak to me for 4 minutes? Yep, I have someone that's already jumped out of their seat. Run like the wind. Okay, while we're having this, let's come around to the end here. While I'm having this conversation, I'd like you to think about what I'm doing in the first 2-minute conversation, round to the steps, and what I'm doing in the second one, and then I'm going to talk through about the intervention after that. So just see what you might notice. Thank you very much for volunteering. I'm Wendy, you are?
I'm Zara.
Zara, right. We need to get nice and close to the microphone. Nice. Say hello to these lovely people.
Hello, everyone.
Okay, Zara. Right, I also have a glamorous assistant in the front row that's going to time 2 2-minute conversations for me, okay? And you've got a behaviour you'd like to change and you're ready to talk to me about it and share it in front of all these people.
Yes.
Excellent. So, yes, if you don't mind starting the 2 minutes. So can you tell us what the behaviour is that you'd like to change?
My eating habits.
Your eating habits. There's always something we want to change with our eating habits, isn't there? So it would be good if you could tell me what the eating habit is that you'd like to change.
Well, I like sweets a lot.
Sweets, I know, and it's difficult.
Sweets and cakes, yes, I'm trying to.
And we're now at the new year, so a really good time to be making a New Year's resolution to cut out sweets and cakes and things. So clearly, as you see from a lot of the study and the work that's going on, you know, we need to be mindful of the things that we eat and the way we look after our bodies and all those kinds of things. So it's a really good thing that you're trying to do. So today would be a good day to start, I think. So cut out those sweets and cakes today. I'm sure there'll be lots of healthy foods available today. And then I guess it's just making sure that you stick with that, really, isn't it? So good idea to make a plan. Yeah, so a plan to kind of cut out the sweets. And then think about something you could replace the sweets with. Is usually a good strategy, isn't it, when people are trying to change their diets and think about the things that they'd like to do.
Like low-calorie stuff.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Do you know, I think sometimes just sort of replacing your sweet things with fresh fruit and vegetables. It's not so much worrying about calories, is it? It's just thinking about the healthier things in your diet. Yeah, so thinking about those things, yeah. So it would be good to get started. Another thing people do is sometimes put off, starting these things. So think about maybe replacing, your sweet things with carrot sticks or apples or...
Apples are good.
Apples, maybe apples. That would be quite a nice thing to change too. So do you think you could get that sort of started this week, maybe?
I could try.
And today you're going to be good. Everybody here is going to keep an eye out for Zara. Make sure she's not eating any cakes in the break. Everyone have a good look. Okay. That's my 2 minutes, thank goodness. Right, so could you time me for another 2 minutes? And I'm going to have another go at that. Okay, Zara, we're going to do that again. So Zara, what is the behaviour that you'd like to change?
I'd like to eat better.
Okay, so what kinds of things do you think you'd like to eat more of?
I think more fruits, more fibres, more fibre.
Okay, and what's motivating you to think about that at this point?
Well, I think my health.
Okay, what signs or symptoms have you noticed, or what concerns do you
Well,
have?
I've lost quite a bit, but I suffer from fasciitis, some back problems, and I've had knee surgery. So all of those have really made me think about my health more, and how it had an impact on me as I'm growing older and creaking everywhere.
So what specific things do you think you'd like to change? I mean, what things would you like to eat less of?
Well, I think, as I said, less sweets, try and sort of cut back on those. I've tried, sometimes not very successfully, but at least I'm working on it.
So what happens when you successfully cut them out? What things need to sort of happen?
I think just to remember.
Okay. So
motivation.
So how can you sort of remember that's
well, basically,
your plan?
try and avoid buying things like that.
Okay.
Groceries, when you go grocery shopping, just to look at those aspects, try and get more fibre, more fruit in, and maybe sometimes
and
have little treats.
And how difficult is it when you go shopping to avoid buying those kinds of things then? What makes it difficult for you?
Well, there's a lot of branding, isn't there? And it's the way that's you know, and it's easier to eat, and it's delicious.
So what do you think you need to do next? What's your first step?
Well, I've already started the first step. First step is just to avoid them as much as possible. And go towards the grocery part, go towards the fruits and veg and that part.
Okay, so that was our 2 minutes on that. So Zara, thank you. Hopefully we can catch up again over lunch. Thank you, Zara, for volunteering. So those two conversations might have felt a little bit different to you. I haven't really got time in this session to ask you, but I would hope that you might talk about that perhaps in the coffee break or when you see me, about what the two different things there that you were seeing. And so I'm just going to describe the training in a little bit more detail, so to unpick a little bit about what was going on there. So we've developed and delivered and evaluated healthy conversation skills, and I'm the lead on this, and we have delivered this to a range of healthcare and social care practitioners. I'm going to go very fast. Healthcare practitioners in the UK and in various places across the world, and there are 4 competencies that we focus on, and what you'd have seen me doing there was a lot of the first one, so asking those open questions and listening more than talking. I hope you all thought that I listened more than I did in the first one, where I did an awful lot of talking. And the idea that practitioners reflect on their practice, and also actually you need to get to the point where you support someone to make a goal. If people can come up with their own solutions, think about their own barriers and make their own goals for change, and commit to them and think about how they're going to put them into practice, they're much more likely to achieve them than if you come up with suggestions and ideas for what things that might work for them, as you probably saw in those 2 types of conversation. So we have, I'm just going to show you very quickly 2 bits of evaluation. So we asked trainees to respond, and there's some of my lovely trainees, to some statements such as there are lovely vegetables. And what we saw was that before the training, they were making lots of suggestions. So the blue bar on the left-hand side of the slide shows you how many suggestions people make. This is a typical response when you want to help somebody. Somebody says, I don't know what to do, I'm doing this, I want to do that. We go into fix-it mode. We don't just have to be health and social care practitioners to do that. We all do it with family, friends. You want to fix them. And actually what we want to do is shift people to be much more exploratory. And at time 2, you can see people asking a lot more of those open questions, exploring people's worlds, find out what works for them, find out what their first steps can be, not what you think their first steps might be. A much more empowering, you'll hear that word a lot today, I'm sure, a much more empowering approach to be able to support people to make change. So that was straight after the training, but up to a year later, when we looked at staff in 2 different areas, one trained, one not trained, we can see that for all of our competencies, there were significant shifts. The one that was less shifting was smarter, but that was getting close to it. So that they are asking more questions, they are listening more, they are supporting planning and spending quite a lot of their time asking these questions. So this training can have a real impact on our staff, and from what they've said to us, this has been really valuable for their practice and how they've enjoyed and gained in job satisfaction. We currently have a trial running at the moment, our spring trial, which will involve 600 pregnant women. We're about halfway through recruitment for that. And we're going to be looking at where our research staff are trained in healthy conversations and have these kinds of discussions with them throughout their pregnancy, asking them what issues they'd like to think about, what kind of changes they want to make, how that might impact on the health behaviours they adopt during and after pregnancy. So we've got a couple more years of recruitment on that trial, but we're already running some process evaluation and getting to understand what the nurses and the people taking part in our study feel about this approach while they're pregnant. So this runs alongside their routine care, and our research nurses don't offer advice, they literally will just encourage the woman to think about what she would like to do. And this obviously is our approach to thinking about how we break that cycle that Mary spoke about. So the idea that just giving people information is not sufficient. People need to be engaged, people need to be thinking about their worlds, people need to own the first step that they want to make. So we need to think all the time about how do we reach the populations that are out there. And we know hard to reach is not a great term to encompass all the diversity of the people that don't necessarily engage with services. And what we feel is if we train frontline practitioners in these skills, it's a mechanism to engage with those populations. So at any opportunity to ask somebody what matters to them, what they want to do next, just ask those questions is something that we train our practitioners to think about doing and therefore break this cycle. And we just have questions for you, really. Some of you will see in our workshop this afternoon, which is another opportunity to try out some of our activities and to give us some feedback. You're the workforce out there. You have this enormous role with supporting young women, either in between pregnancies or during their pregnancy. This is such a vital time in their lives to be thinking about these issues. So I'm interested and will be interested, if you see us today, please come up to us, what you think about this kind of approach, how we can engage with this population, including young women who are well. We have, a well population, free living. How do we get to them? How do we get them thinking about their diets? How can we use existing services to reach these populations and target them? And how can we explore how feasible and acceptable and cost-effective this is? So getting service commissioners to think about the skills that might be useful for staff to have to support these women. And I think that's the next slide. So thank you very much. Hope I just about get to time.